Good afternoon and welcome to the premiere episode of our new series, Voice of Supply Chain. Following the program, we will be sending you a copy of the recording along with your continuing education for today's attendance. Please be sure to use our Q&A or the chat function if you should have a question. I will now turn the program over to our series host, Sarah Scudder, President of Real Sourcing Network.
Thank you, Kathy. I am so excited to kick off our Voice of Supply Chain series. This is something that Kathy approached me about a couple months ago, and she knows I'm a big believer in storytelling, and I think there's so much power and energy that we can learn from each other by hearing stories. So I was super excited about the series idea, and she asked me to kick it off, and I said, under one condition, I want to have Jenti as our first guest. So Jenti is here with me today. Her and I both live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we're enjoying actually some beautiful weather today, which is really nice. She has an absolutely adorable dog. So we maybe will get a guest appearance by the dog today. Jenti and I actually met last year at a conference called Spark here in San Francisco. We never actually spoke in person at the conference, but we saw each other. And then a month or so after, Jenti did this really powerful post on LinkedIn talking about her story and how she made it to the United States and overcame so many things in her life to become a chief procurement officer. And I was so touched by her story that I reached out to her on LinkedIn and said, we have to be friends. So since then, we've evolved and had this incredible friendship over the last 12 months. So it is such an honor to be interviewing Jenti today. And I want this to be interactive, so feel free to use the chat function to post comments or notes. We also have the Q&A function running, so if you have specific questions about something that Jenti talks about or something that I don't bring up today, feel free to put that in. Jenti's a really open book and has some incredible stories to share with us. So with that, Jenti, I want to start off the conversation today talking a little bit about your childhood, because I think your childhood had such a big impact on why you came to the United States and why you did the things you did. So what was the most impactful childhood memory?
Thank you, Sarah. And before I talk about my childhood, I want to say how happy I am to have this conversation with you today, because last February, when we were at the Spark conference and Dr. Louise and all of you women were bustling out everywhere, I was watching from the background and I was like, this girl, she has such a spark in her life. I can feel it. And I want to go talk to her. And I kept chasing you everywhere because your jacket, your newspaper jacket was so attractive. But every time I got close to you, everybody was flocking around you and talking. So I missed the opportunity. But to have my very first virtual interview with the person I was chasing, I feel pretty honored. So thank you for that.
Well, Jenti, so normally I'm wearing newspaper print since I run a startup in the procurement space. So we help companies manage their print spends. But today I'm wearing a very special jersey. So we'll get to that later in the interview.
Sure. Okay, so now talking about my childhood, all of us remember our childhood in one way or the other. And mine was when I was 9 years old. I remember my parents, my dad being a big entrepreneur and traveling around the world for business as well as pleasure trips with my mom and his friends. He went on a world tour and he came back in 1971 with a lot of stuff from United States and other parts of the world. But he brought me a very special gift, and it was a Mickey Mouse watch. And I was so excited because it has yellow straps, and the way my mom was explaining, her journey and, this incredible woman, mother of 6 girls. And then she's bought everything, one of everything for each daughter. And then she's explaining, and she then turned around and she said, I brought you this, and it's a watch. And when she spoke about this, I was like, I need to go to this fairyland called United States of America, because that's where I want to be. So you can imagine from 9 years old, I was dreaming about coming to this country. And that's a very heartfelt childhood memory that I have from 1970s.
So Jenti, you are one of how many siblings?
We are 6 girls in a
Okay.
country where women are considered secondary, and I'm number 5, the lucky one.
So I'm the oldest of 4 girls, so I can
Oh,
relate.
okay.
So Jenti, you mentioned that your dad brought this gift back from you, which was a watch, and that kind of inspired you to learn more about the United States and some of the things that were possible for you. When did you realize that having a career was not an option for you?
Oh, right from the get-go, because we came from a pretty affluent family. And first of all, one person worked and the entire family was supported, even in the middle class. And coming from a wealthy upper class family, and the culturally, women didn't work during those times. And even if you had your own business, we didn't go into business, and the men took care of most of it. So having a career was not even an option right from the get-go. And even to this day, among all the 6 siblings, I'm the only one who actually works for a living. So all of them are independently on their own with their families and living their lives.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of hard for some of us to even process or understand. I was raised in a family where we were told from a very young age that we can do and be anything. We were encouraged to go to school and have as big of careers as we wanted. So the idea that as a small child, you were raised to not ever think about working or having a career is a big mind shift for a lot of us in the room today.
Yeah.
So one of the other things, Jenti, that I think is really interesting about your story is you mentioned you grew up in a really wealthy family, which is
Mm-hmm.
it's not common also. So how did you know you were so wealthy as a child, and why did this wealth actually make your life so difficult?
You know, the word wealthy was not in our vocabulary. We just lived. You know, the colonial British way of living, if you did make it, and my dad was, was educated in England, and he was an entrepreneur working for the British, and then he started his own company. So he emulated a lifestyle of living the life of how the British brought stuff to India. So rather than talking about whether we were wealthy or not, we lived a lifestyle where um, it went without saying that you follow certain rules and regulations. Like at the family, you lead a very protected life, very secluded life, and then you didn't go out of the house on your own. You were chaperoned everywhere. So, but then when I went to a very good Christian school, a convent, but also always the nuns used to ask this question: hey, can I borrow your chauffeur and your car to go run our errands, because they didn't have any of these vehicles. So it's only at that time when we were asked favors and stuff, we never thought about we were wealthy. However, when I came to this country and I realized, damn, I was one of those wealthy family members. I wish I had done certain things to understand that. I didn't realize I had it so good, because I'd never made my bed or coffee or anything ever in my life until I was 21 years old and I came to this country. So, and we had 15 people working for us, and I didn't even have my own showers. I had a nanny give me a bath every day until I was 18 years old. How about that?
So Jenti, I'm not gonna lie, I wouldn't mind having a chef cooking all my meals for me.
We had one for 40 years, believe it or not. I was just like a family member. So,
Wow.
yeah.
So Jenti, you mentioned you went to a Christian school and were educated by nuns. What was one of the most important things you learned from going to that school?
The British discipline and hard work. And I was very fortunate coming from a country where Hinduism is very big a religion, and having a very broad view of my family, allowing us to have follow any type of religion, and not focusing only on what we follow at home, was very, very helpful. So we had the best of both worlds, and following the British schooling system with the Indian background was a win-win for us.
So even though you were not able to pursue a career and maybe choose your own husband, your family was open-minded when it came to religion.
Yeah, so it was an English medium school. So even when I was in India and 14 different languages are spoken, I actually went to from kindergarten to an English medium school and actually learned to read and write English from the British nuns and teachers, which was very helpful for us to come to a foreign country and survive, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. What would you say is your most difficult childhood experience that you look back and you're actually really thankful for today? It's taught you something that became a really important life lesson.
You know, there's a curse of being in that affluent lifestyle because we had to live for society, and everything we did, especially girls, right? Boys got away with a lot of stuff, but girls, if you had a bad name, then the family's name came down. So everything was so restrictive and so prohibitive that everything, especially with somebody like me with having a free mind, asking questions was wrong. So I feel very restricted. And at 9 years old to feel that way, it was almost like, I don't want to call, say God or nature. I guess got thrown into a country where I didn't belong. I felt like, but then looking back now, I feel really, really fortunate because I love the Indian culture, except for that arranged marriage that was forced on me. Everything else, I look back with a lot of pride and happy that I had that lifestyle and grew up in that environment because it shaped me for who I am today.
Yeah, Jenti, one of the things that I admire most about you is your curiosity. You always want to know why and know more. And I can't imagine you as a child being so curious and not being able to ask questions and explore and do the things that excited you.
Yeah, I was just talking to my sister over the phone last week, and I was saying, we were talking about our family, and I said, remember this one event where in front of the whole group, I asked my mom, did you choose your own husband? And I was like 10, 12 years old. And my mom just almost was so angry. And she was ready to like slap me right there and say, what the hell are you talking about? And because her mother-in-law was there, which is my grandma, and that was like the most offensive thing that I said. But it came naturally to me. And so you can imagine that asking that question back in the 70s, right? Not leave alone 2020s, but in the 70s. So.
Well, and I think your curiosity is one of the things that I think has helped you be so successful in your procurement career, because you're always wanting to know more and understand things at a deeper level.
Oh, yeah. And, whatever you touch in any aspect of your life, there's procurement, right? Whether it's medical or technology or facilities or anything. So it's very interesting. And actually that profession sought me out. So I think I'm very lucky to be that it was my career for the last 30 years.
So you went to a Christian school. You were taught by nuns, and then you went to college. What did you do after college?
So being number 5 in the family, I knew one by one right after school. And as soon as you finish college, you're going to get in line to have that arranged marriage. Like a couple of my sisters got married when they were 16, a couple of them 18, and I was 19. So I was like, oh my God, my time's coming. I'd rather get...
I'm 37 and I'm not married, so I can't even imagine being married at 16.
So there was that, and actually I was actually playing a golf tournament in a different part of the country, and I was actually leading when I got called to say, you need to come because there's a family coming to talk to us to see if that could be a good alliance. This is how it happened. There may be many Indians watching or listening to this podcast, this interview later. Everybody's lives is different. This is about my life and about my family and my experience, right? So I was like so upset and pissed off, and I tried to say things in a different way. And my mom's calling me and saying, you have to stop. I said, Mom, I'm leading the golf tournament. I cannot leave. And she said, you will. So I flew back and I was so freaking pissed. So I was going to tell this guy, hey, gonna tell no, because I want to work and I want to golf and I want to have my own travel agency and stuff. Because my parents traveled, I wanted to have a travel agency. I didn't know how else I could travel, right? So anyway, so I came and I had an 11-month engagement, and I was in my third year of college. And then the wedding was fixed for the following year when I finished college. And it was the most dreadful time, but I had to go through it. And that, talking about having a voice, right?
So Jenti, I don't know a lot about this process. So how does this even work? So your parents set up this initial meeting, and then they decide that they want you guys to get married, and that's it?
Yeah. So I'm talking about my life again, because different cultures have different, practices. So I don't want to be offending anybody, but that's my life. Yes, you go in a cultural, the caste system is very prevalent. So you have to be in the same caste, and also you have to have the same socioeconomic factors. Like if my dad was wealthy, then you look for somebody in that same social class and the wealth class, so you can meet and have that same type of life. All that was great. We were the same caste. We were the same type of a financial background, even though my father was much higher, but the company that they had and all of the stuff seemed to be in a category that seemed to be okay for my family. But the upbringing and the lifestyle that I led, where my dad was so progressive in every other way, to taking me around the world and giving me a good education and opening up to sports and all these other activities, but then finding a family that was the most opposite, most strict in the Indian culture, cannot wear any other outfits but the saris, and you can't even call your spouse by your name, and you can't travel. It's complete. I can't explain, but it was really horrible. But even people ask my family, hey, how are you going to match this? Because this girl seems to be like a Spitfire. And then, but so you know what somebody said? Well, this is what she earns. This is what she gets for being a Spitfire. She has to go to a place where she has to adjust and live. How about that, Sarah?
Jenti, what's a safari? Is that what you said?
A sari. The sari is the Indian outfit that you wear. That's that it's a common costume for our country. But even though there's so many other varieties right now, when I grew up, that was the most prevalent one that everybody wore. Yeah, the women wore.
So your family had this meeting, and then it was decided. You had this 11-month engagement, and then you married a man that you had no say and didn't really know at all.
Correct. At 19 and 20, I got married. I had that arrangement, a wedding.
Okay, and that happened after you graduated.
Correct.
So how did this arranged marriage get you to the United States? I'm always a big believer in looking at the silver linings, and in all the struggles and challenges, good things can come from it. So how did it get you here to America?
So the reason I just didn't get up and leave and come to the US, because it's hard to, without any visa, to come and live in a foreign country, right? At that point in time, the person who was arranged to be, my spouse, gives me jitters to call him my husband. So actually, he was a student and had a visa here. So I came as the spouse of a foreign student, and then I came here back when I was 21 years old, but with the mindset that I need to find my freedom as soon as I got here.
So you were here on a travel visa with the intent that you were wanting to stay here.
I actually came here on a visa that is supported as a spouse of a student.
Okay.
And then that could change to any other category as you applied in the United States. Yes.
Okay. How did you find the courage to get out of this marriage and leave your family, your wealth, basically everything you knew and start over in your 20s?
You know, it's hard because when I talk to my sisters, I don't think any one of them would have done what I did because they like that luxurious lifestyle, and they were accommodative of the culture because they didn't think it was that bad. But for me, it was so it's it the loss of my independence was so great that the privilege of the privileged lifestyle and the resources that I had didn't mean anything to me. And giving all of that up for my independence was a struggle for my victory to owning my life, right? And even when I didn't have anything, I came here with $30 in my hand. And when you lead an affluent lifestyle, you don't realize that $30 doesn't get you far, because I didn't even think. And then on the plane, I spent $17 getting my headphones, and I forgot that I have to save my money. So it's a different, so my totally right-brained phase of my life got me here. And then suddenly when I came to this country, then my left brain was in full function to say, gosh, I have to survive. How do I survive this? But every day was an adventure. Every day was an adventure. I used to look at the calendar and say, day one, I'm in the US. Day two, and 36 years later, I'm still counting. I love this country. I love this country. I love the people.
Yay for the Bay Area. Way to represent.
Yes.
So you got out of this arranged marriage, which is not easy to do from what I understand, and you had no money and nothing. So what's the process for immigrants getting acclimated into the US?
Yeah, so it took me 7 years, by the way, to have everything, and for those 7 years, I just focused on myself. And basically, when you apply for a visa, it takes a while. And I heard recently from a couple of friends of mine, it takes about 10-15 years to get a visa, a green card. Fortunately, those days in the 80s, it took me like a couple of years. But I actually, until I got the right visa status, I could not work for pay. So I actually looked up the yellow pages and decided, hey, you know what? I want to work somewhere for free so I can, beef up my skills. And when it's ready for me to get employed somewhere else, somewhere, then it'll be a right time for me to get going. And, a couple of my siblings who were in India, they helped me greatly with the mental strain that I had to go through. Became very anorexic at some point, and because I was denounced for whatever I did back home. And even though you're millions of miles away, you care. And that also shows your personality. I love my family. I love the society. But what I did, I hurt myself more than I did anybody else. And that took a big toll on my health. But at the same time, the friendship that I built here and the stuff that I got excited that it's my life, my decisions, my choice. And if I screwed up, I don't have anybody to blame but myself. Give me the courage to keep it moving forward. Yeah.
So Jenti, how did you live without earning an income? Like financially, I mean, we live in the Bay Area. It's a very expensive place. Like, what did you do to survive?
Sarah bought groceries for $20 a month. Coming from a place where I had 14, words that we don't use today as helpers, but servants, they call them in India and the colonial British rule. But I never cared about any of the stuff, except my health got really affected. But at the end, my dad and through my siblings sent some money in some way, and I just lived. I forgot golf. I brought the same old clothes that I had back in India, and I wore that for like 5-6 years. Didn't buy anything, but I did work. I did, and somebody said, "Hey, Jenti has such a spark," and I had all that energy. So coming to this country and having that independence gave me everything, that's free spirit, and I could forsake anything and everything for that, including my love for golf. So.
And you mentioned you struggled with anorexia, eating disorders, or something that lots of people struggle with. How did you get over that? I mean, it's something I'm sure you still live with today. It never just goes away, but how did you overcome the anorexia and just kind of move on to the next phase in your life?
You know, I tried to go to many doctors and nobody helped. My hair started falling out. And suddenly when my hair started falling out, I was like, oh my God, I got to take care of this myself. And I think I went to Stanford Hospital and they gave me some type of help there that was very, I think I was able to look within to say why and ask some questions as to why. And, you know, it's easy to talk about a lifestyle change, but I didn't, even though I was excited to be here and stuff, I think my body, my physical body was going through a different type of a shock that I had to adjust and live. And I got better. Yeah, got better.
Yeah, it's really amazing because there's a lot of people that struggle with that forever, and it
Yeah.
just has a huge
Yeah.
impact on everything that they do. So
Yeah.
kudos to you for finding the will to overcome that with no support. I mean, you were
Yeah.
here completely on your own and didn't know anyone. So Jenti, I want to talk a little bit about now how you got your first job. So you didn't go to school in the United States, so you had no US college degree and you couldn't work for a while because you didn't have your green card. And you mentioned you started volunteering. How did this volunteer work help you get a paying job?
So, you know, back in the 80s, wish there was internet or social media. We just had the Thomas Register for procurement and the yellow pages for finding suppliers, right? So I looked up the yellow pages and there was City of Sunnyvale and it says it had a volunteer office. So I called them and I said, I'd like to volunteer. They said, the volunteering is for court referrals, you know, where if you're a juvenile and you had some offense, you have to do some time. So I said, well, it's not that I committed any crime. I want to work in a volunteer office and I want to volunteer. So I had an interview with the volunteer office and they said, how many hours do you want to work? An hour a week or so? I said, no, full time. I want to work 40 hours.
You're like the dream, right? To come in and want to volunteer full time.
Yeah. So then I started working, and then you know, look, this is new, coming from a wealthy family, and then going to school and college, playing golf, and then suddenly but everything was so exciting. I started answering phones, and man, the typing was tough because I couldn't type more than 5 words a minute. So it was hard. So I said, okay, first things first, I will never get a job where I have to type. So I have to use my brain rather than sit and type, right? So then I started working, and then they were like, all these people around me were like, hey, this girl has a lot of spunk, you know, and I don't know why she's working. So I had to explain to them about you know, usually you don't see immigrants in government administration. Usually they're engineers or software engineers and lawyers or doctors and stuff. So I'm telling them these stories and stuff. So within this, when I got the opportunity, I started working as a full-time volunteer, almost 2,000 hours a year. And I worked for 3 years that way. And I worked at the city manager's office, the mayor's office. Then I worked in HR. And then from there, I went to the police department. And sometimes I used to work in the police department after I worked in HR after 5 p.m. And so I was like, everybody's like, you know, there's something about her that she's very willing and she's hardworking and very committed. And
so Jenti, how many hours? You said 3 years working full-time. How many hours did you rack up of volunteer work?
Probably 4,000 hours, probably. Yeah. Hey, but it got me a job without typing a resume. Everybody knew Jenti. And my very first paid job was in the, actually, when I got my green card in 87, was in HR. I was the HR liaison to get all the applicants for the jobs and stuff. And let me tell you, you have, in the civil service rules, you have to pass the test for going to the next step. You have to have the written typing test, and from the typing test to a written exam for grammar and all stuff, and then you go for the interviews. And I was like, I can't pass the first hurdle because I can't type. What do I do? So guess what I did? I was a proctor for all of the tests in the HR department, and I took that sheet of paper and I memorized it. So when it was time for me to take the test, I typed 55 words a minute because I did it with my 2 fingers. And little did I know, I was typing with my middle finger. And when I was in the Sunnyvale Police, when somebody used to come and ask for help at the front desk, I would say, 1 minute, please. You see what I'm doing? 1 minute, please.
You're what I call a keyboard hack.
Exactly.
That just kind of plunk on the keyboard.
Yeah, but guess what I was thinking? I was flipping off everybody. 1 minute, please. Let me. So then I was making everybody angry, and I was like, why are everybody coming to the police department angry with me? Then somebody said, Jenti, you're flipping everybody off. I said, what's flipping me? This is how I learned.
Oh my gosh, that is hilarious. So you figured out very creative and strategic about memorizing it. So you passed the test, and then so you had this paying HR job. How did that turn into getting into procurement?
So from there, in the evenings after working a full time, I went to work at the Sunnyvale Police, and I was doing all the fingerprint cards, typing up the fingerprint cards for all those people who were arrested. So nobody wanted to do the job. No paid employee wanted to do it. So I said, okay, I'll do it. So the lady was like, wow, would you like to get paid? I said, yes. So I actually negotiated a 25% raise right there from HR. And I told HR, I'm leaving. I'm going to Sunnyvale Police to work. Because when I asked her for a pay increase, she wouldn't give it to me. She's like, you just started, Jenti. I'm like, okay. So I got a full-time job, paid full-time job at the Sunnyvale Police. And it was something that I could do very well. And then from there, a couple of years later, that's when I was anorexic. I was working and a lot of stuff and a lot of things that I had to also take care of my health and stuff. So I decided I would just go and work in the Sunnyvale Library. I got a promotion there. So I was actually in charge of all the library acquisitions, procuring all the books and the periodicals and the shelving and all of the stuff. So that's where my procurement career began, in acquisitions, acquiring books and periodicals and audiovisual materials. And that's where I met my husband too.
You have a print background.
Oh yes.
I think you're the only person I've known that's gotten into the procurement industry through the library. So
yes,
very interesting story. Yeah. And you learned how to negotiate your raise. So you were well on your way.
Oh, you bet.
So you're working in the library. What next?
Okay, so the library, we had they decided to close the library because they had to renovate it. And they told everybody, hey, if you'd like to take some time off, this is a perfect time. And if a few of us, you'd like to work part-time, we're going to have a relocation. So I decided, hey, I was telling my husband, okay, now it's a perfect time to have a child. Let's go plan to have our second child. Little did I know that I was going to be the acquisition queen of buying all the materials, the shelving and all of the stuff. So when in 1998 was when I was really interested in advancing my procurement career. And the procurement director was watching everything that was happening, and I was doing a kick-ass job as a procurement liaison, not even in the finance department. So she said, you would make a great buyer. And that's when I asked how so. And she said, you ask the right questions and you have the energy and you tackle all of the functions and you ask the right questions, including for AP, the accounts payable department. So she opened up a recruitment, and of course there I was, and I applied for the job, and I actually got the acquisition buyer role in City of Sunnyvale. Yeah.
And you mentioned your husband. So this was a marriage of choice?
Oh yes, of course. And of course, I had to do everything opposite. So my husband was actually a student in city of Sunnyvale, and he was going to school in San Jose State. And we were friends for quite a few years, and we fell in love. And of course, this is a 6 feet 5 inches Dutch, very different from Indian culture. But yep, I'm happily married 27 years.
And you mentioned he's in photography?
Yes, he went to school in photography. Talk about going from a caste where you are an industrialist to finding somebody you love and doing what they choose to do, right? Yep. And he's working for Stanford right now. He's a property manager. And we have some amazing pictures of our kids as they grow up. And some of my pictures when I was in my 20s too and 30s. Yeah.
Beautiful. And you shared some of the photos from your wedding. Very, very beautiful. And I'm happy that you guys found each other and you were able to find someone that you wanted to spend your life with.
Thank you.
So you got this buyer role. Somebody saw something in you. You applied for a job and you were selected. That is a far cry from being a chief procurement officer. So how in the world did you get to be a CPO?
Yeah, so when I was a buyer, my boss gave me some of the most important assignments because I always went and knocked on a door saying, give me more work, right? So when back in the 90s, when e-procurement just evolved, she put me in charge of learning how to automate some of the contracts that we had, and also negotiate with suppliers to have a punch out of their own website and Granger and Office Depot types, right?
And at that time, punch out is super common today, API integrations, but at that time, that was a big thing.
Yes, in fact, I have some newspaper articles that show that Jenti Vandertuig negotiated with Granger to have a 15% discount on online catalogs. And then we used to also even order rubber stamps on our, that everything has to be funneled because they would have all these stamps and stuff. So I was like, oh my God, I need to find some solution to this. So my boss called me in and said, well, let's do an e-procurement study. We'll bring one of the big fours to do the study. So I was in charge of this as a junior buyer. To actually work with Deloitte to do the analysis because we were a big KPMG, Pete Marwick financial system operation in city of Sunnyvale. And we brought Deloitte in and we did the entire study. I still have the study from 2000. And at that time, she also sent me to conferences. And I went to a conference where I met number of CEOs. And I actually signed up City of Sunnyvale for an e-procurement, e-print solution with a company called Impress.com. And a month later, I actually got an offer from them, unbelievable offer, to come and work as a sales operations manager. And I went running to my boss to say, what do I do? And she says, go try it out. If it doesn't work out, you can come back to me, back again. And that was the most amazing thing. I went there, but I realized I was not in sales, or I was not happy. We blew like $200 million, but I learned something. I had the most amazing boss, again, another new boss, and she was like a machine. She was so fast, she was so quick. I learned a lot from her. And then when the company closed down during the dot-com crisis, I decided I need to move on, but I didn't want to go back to City of Sunnyvale. I actually applied at Cisco to be I want to go to the private sector to expand my, breadth of procurement activities. But that's the time when everybody put a freeze. And then I became a contractor. And then I worked at County of Santa Clara, where there was a huge need for procurement staff. And that's when I joined back in 2000.
Jenti, you mentioned you didn't like sales. Why?
I like the power of money in my hands. I don't like to sell. I've got so many offers, because I negotiated so many. I mean, I'm not kidding. My very first contract that I negotiated was County of Santa Clara. I saved $750,000. And nobody had even, the word negotiation was not there in the vocabulary or in the history of procurement, right? And the second contract I had, I saved $12 million. So, that was the electronic voting system back there. So it's not like I just suddenly got all promoted. Anything I touched in County of Santa Clara, nobody wanted to do anything. And I had this, energy and the curiosity and also the perseverance to do the toughest thing. And then the biggest problem for me was I damn couldn't type, man. So I used to go after putting the kids to sleep, I used to go finish typing up all of the stuff because I was able to think faster than my typing, right? So I worked some very, very long hours, and I did some massive projects. They had hired KPMG back in, I think, 1999 or 2000 to do a business process reengineering. And they did some amazing study to say, here are the quick wins, and here's the midterm and long-term solutions. So naturally, by way of me working, they put all of the quick wins on my lap to say, Jenti, we're going to make you responsible for this. And I ran with it. I actually ran the procurement card system from scratch. I was scared of public speaking. Actually, I found a coach to teach me how to get over the fear of public speaking and all of the stuff. And then I actually started doing IT acquisitions. Then I did the toughest and the largest acquisitions, and the customers started loving me. And I got the highest rating of customer surveys, satisfaction survey. So that God gave me some confidence. I'm like, hey, I'm doing something right. So let's keep going. And then also I had Mark and myself had 2 kids, and our decision was to send them to private school. And I know we had to work hard for a living. Yeah, work hard for a living.
So Jenti, it seems like in everything that you just talked about, that you always have been really drawn to the technology part of procurement, the
Yes.
automation, the efficiency piece. So I want to dive into that a little bit, but how did you get the head of procurement or chief procurement officer job? So there are so many people in the industry, and there are not a lot of those types of positions, let alone being a woman, being an immigrant. English is not your first language. We've established that you were a keyboard plunker. So how did you get this job, and what advice do you have for other people who have aspirations of having really big procurement jobs and they just don't know how to get there?
Yeah. So in public sector, the civil service rules, you have to have these many years of experience. You should have this type of education. You have this pre-qualification, which is not so in the private sector, right? So when my boss, I had a boss who was there for 2 years, and then she moved to work for the state of California for Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I decided, okay, I need to work for somebody exactly like the boss I had in the past. I had 2 great bosses, one at City of Sunnyvale and one at Impress, that e-print company. So I contacted my boss from City of Sunnyvale to apply for the job, and says, boss, you need to come be my boss so we can do big things. And there's a lot of money here. In the City of Santa Clara, a City of Sunnyvale was 80 million probably, and here is like $2 billion, right? So the complexity was large and huge enough to have somebody with a lot of experience. So she applied for the job too. And when I was talking to other people, somebody said, Jenti, why don't you apply? A few customers contacted me and said, you'll make a great, I said, I don't have the experience in the leadership and also all of these commodities. So I said, hey, what the hell, let me apply. Because when I did that, I got called by the Genentech, which is this company, biotechnology company. One of our chief information officers was a VP at Genentech, and he and I hit it off really well in the County of Santa Clara when he was there. So he had asked me to apply for the job and an opportunity to work for him. And then my boss, who went to the state, was saying, Jenti, do you want to come to the state? Because we can open up another position there and you could be the number 2. So I was like, hey, what is this? Everybody's calling me, but why not take a chance? And I applied for the job. Right. And I got rejected actually because I didn't have the years of experience.
And Jenti, when you say you applied for the job, what job did you apply for?
I applied for the head of procurement. That the title called Chief Procurement Officer is relatively new in the public sector. So they either call it as a department head or head of procurement or purchasing manager or some other stuff, right? So they even changed the name from purchasing to procurement in the county of Santa Clara, trying to attract the right people and stuff. So there's a lot of people who applied all around different parts of the United States, as well as locally in Santa Clara. And I got rejected in the first attempt to say I didn't have enough years of experience. So I wrote a 3-page letter, and I wrote all the $300 million worth of transaction activities I was managing as an IT procurement manager for the last 2 years, and how successful I was, and I saved the money. And I attached all of the customer survey satisfaction results, and I submitted and said, give me an opportunity to at least interview. So I interviewed, and they brought out interviewed panelists from outside of the county of Santa Clara, and actually I was like the top 5 candidates. And then during the final interview, I actually was the top 3, and then I got offered the position.
So you went from nothing, right, being at the very bottom of the stack, to being in the top 5 by advocating for yourself.
Yes, of course. Yes. And I did get a lot of help. There's a couple of things. One, I don't have a fear of, I don't know, what do I do? I don't have pride and ego. So I was able to ask. So I actually called my previous bosses and asked them, hey, I want to apply for this job. I've typed a couple of resumes in my life, right? I don't have the experience. Can you help me? So she actually gave me something called the Skill Builder, and somebody from Genentech actually helped. And somebody I don't even know who it is, but by word of mouth, people were asking. And then I also had probably the confidence, because I was sought after in a couple of other places too, which is big positions, not small, yeah. Right? So then I had to choose, do I drive with 2 small children all the way from San Jose to South San Francisco, or to relocate to Sacramento, or should I take this job, right? So I had options.
So what was your first day like, being a head of procurement or chief procurement officer? I mean, it would have freaked me out. I would have been super overwhelmed.
Well, let me tell you, it was exciting, and it was very, very tough, because I already had worked in a way that County of Santa Clara was not used to, was because I executed 100% of the time. And effort without execution is okay in certain parts of the public sector. And that was never the way it was in city of Sunnyvale or in my father's companies, right? And then the second thing is, by way of promotion, I was the head of the people who I was reporting to, right? That was very, very tough. So suddenly I'm sitting at the top, but at the same time, I have this drive, and I don't have the full leadership skills that come with this position that is required. But I knew I was able. I did not have any doubt about my technical abilities at all, because I had done all of this stuff, even when I didn't have to work for a living, you know.
So Jenti, one of the things that comes to mind for me, I have several friends who work in the public sector, run companies that really focus on that segment. There's a big stigma, at least here in the Bay Area, and in a lot of the people that I interact with, that people who are in government are lazy, they're underachievers, they are not innovative, they're just there because they want a pension. So how did you overcome this and motivate people who weren't necessarily of a corporate mindset and focused on, being really driven and wanting to make all of these changes?
Yeah, it's very sad that people have that opinion, especially, where I'm consulting right now. There's a big tug of war between the public sector and the public-private partnership. It's unfair for the people who work, because in most of these organizations, especially like the size of the county of Santa Clara, is very heavily unionized. But I learned a couple of things. One is it's a different mindset of how to spend taxpayers' money and move that forward. And also in a culture where there was no performance evaluations, you get paid based on a scale of step 1 through 5. You have civil service rules where you just apply for jobs. And here I'm a poster child, and I'm coming to this county, and I'm saying, sorry, a buyer classification in County of Santa Clara is under clerical administrative. They look at us as typing 6-part forms. And here I have done quite a few as a journey level procurement contractor, as well as a procurement manager. And I'm advocating hiring people, not in the union, but in the management association type of classification. So actually, when I did that, there was a lot of tension, and staff stood in front of the board and said not to support me. And I had to learn myself. It's like, am I going to push myself to get negative feedback from everybody all the time? So a couple of things what I had to do, and it was a very tough situation for me, was I had to get a coach to sort of learn myself first, how to lead without fear of failure. And the second situation is, how do I do it in a way that I take care of the organization first and uphold the vision and mission and values of the organization. So when it came to the union environment, I actually learned to partner with the union steward. And I got to tell you as a story, I did most of the heavy lifting because I had to. Procurement was called a black eye of County of Santa Clara in my department, and the HR was one, and so I'm an overachiever and in charge, and there's no established performance protocols, and you got to do this, and so nobody told me to work like this. In fact, if I had worked less, I would have been even more successful, right? But I didn't want to take the job where I had to do that type of a change in my personality. So I had to learn the hard way. I brought in some consultants, which was, I think, the most horrible thing I did, even though I'm a consultant right now, because their end was just to finish the project and move on. They didn't really care, versus having that type of a connection with the people. So I had to learn the hard way. And that's when I learned a lot through my coach, who was not judgmental. And he actually brought out the 7 habits of highly effective people, and the 8th habit, which is finding your voice, and teaching me to understand myself. And but I got to tell you, in 2008, I went to India for a big wedding, my nephew's wedding. And it was an arranged marriage, but with 5,000 people. You could talk about Hollywood. Okay, this 60, I don't know how, there's so much wealth. You didn't have to work. So I'm sitting there and I'm with my BlackBerry and I'm working, and somebody comes and says, so what's your product? And I'm like, product? I didn't fit in there because I'm now an American, you know? And I said, no, I'm working. I don't work. I don't have any. She said, which company do you own? I said, I don't own any company. I work for a government. They're like, you're sitting at a wedding and you're typing up and you work for the government. That's the most derogatory role that you could have, working for government in India. So I'm like, no, I have a sense of, I have a need. My staff were contacting me, but I noticed something. I had to answer every question. People were not able to do their work on their own because they wanted somebody to make those decisions, right? And when I was there, my daughter was in the 5th grade, and she was flying back because she was going to a new private school, and she wanted to run for student council as the head of student council. So I'm trying to pacify her. Hey, you're going to the new school. Don't worry about it. You know, if you lose out, and mom's going to stay behind. And I'm pacifying her. And she goes, so she calls me from US to India when I'm there at 3 a.m. in the morning because of the time difference. And she says, Mom, I won. And I said, how the hell did you win? And she says, I'll tell you, Mom, when I was in India for 2 weeks for the wedding, I actually recruited all the 1st graders. I got them all from Michael's store. I got them all the stuff, and they went and distributed all over the school. And I made them all do all the work. And I actually recruited the best people, the 1st graders, and I talked to them. And when I went back after 2 weeks, my name and the flyers were everywhere. And actually I won, and I'm the head of student council. I was head of a brand new school. So I said, oh my God, my daughter who's in the 5th grade in a brand new school has taught me something. I need to find the stars in my own team and lean on them. And one of the stars was the union steward who cared so deeply about the people. I cared deeply about the people. And we joined our hands together to say, I will support you in any way. And if you can help me. So she was like my right hand, changing policy and stuff. And that was my journey of being a journey level CPO, from being a novice to being effective. And in 17 years, it took me 17 years to handle the people, process, and then implement technology. And then I finished my career when I hit 55. It's in a nutshell, but it was a lot of pain, but a lot of effort, but many, many rewards.
So Jenti, we have about 4 minutes left. So I want to ask one final question about your time as a CPO, and then I want to do kind of a spitfire round to get your feedback on a few things. So what are you most proud of in your 17 years as a CPO? What accomplishment or what thing that you do that you feel best about?
You know, among many, many things, based on what we are talking today, the first thing is my desire to live my life and do what thing I did best allowed me to expand my department and contribute to society in a way that 50 families benefited, because my department grew 308%. That means I supported 50 families, giving them opportunities. And at the same time, I took care of the taxpayers' monies wisely and contributed to society. And it was so fulfilling for me to serve in a capacity as a public servant.
And then you turned 55 and you decided to, I'm going to say in quotes, retire.
Yes.
Why did you choose to retire, and what are you doing now?
So, you know, all of this success doesn't come without some other consequences, right? So somewhere with my health and my family was taking a second and third choices in my life, which was not detrimental to the Vandertuig family and my health. So I thought this was a perfect time for me to segue in and take a break and smell the roses, go around the world, travel and stuff, and spend time with the family and recoup a little bit. So that's what I did. But I did a lot of traveling for 1 year after I retired. And then I started teaching at UC Santa Cruz, Silicon Valley Extension. And at that time, my daughters were like, Mom, especially my younger one was like, where were you when we needed you? You know, but now I have my life. You're bothering me too many times a day. I said, I want to be there for you. She's like, that's good. You know, leave me alone when let me come back to you. So, you know, I had to get back into the working world a little bit. And I got called to work for the San Francisco 49ers as a consultant. And that's where I'm working for right now, a year and a half that I've been so excited to work for another amazing boss and some incredible people at the 49ers, and I'm helping them transform their procurement operations.
So Jenti, in honor of your new employer, I am rocking my number 10 Jimmy Garoppolo jersey. So hands down, hottest quarterback ever in the NFL, and I'm obsessed with watching the 49ers because of him. So I'm wishing him a very speedy recovery. I know he got injured, so we want him to be back in full force next year. So we have
a minute. Great taste, girl.
So we have a minute left. I want to do a spitfire round. I'm going to ask you 5 things, and if you can answer in 1 or 2 words.
Yeah.
Most unique hobby.
Daydreaming.
Chore you hate doing the most.
Taking the garbage out.
Favorite book.
Awaken the Giant Within.
Most inspirational leader.
Keith Kroc, who's a founder of Ariba.
And best parenting advice.
don't wait till you retire to take care of family and enjoy time. Yeah.
All right, Jenti, well, it's been a pleasure to interview you and tell your story. We are exactly at time. I'm going to turn it back over to Kathy to close out our very first Voice of Supply Chain interview.
Oh, thank you. Thank you both so much. Oh, and thank you so much, Jentine, for sharing your journey. I mean, a personal journey. I hope everybody on the joining us today on this program really had some takeaways from everything you shared with us today. And I really appreciate you being on our first episode of Voice of Supply Chain. I would like to let everybody also know that to join us on February 24th, as Sarah then interviews Sarah Barnes Humphrey, who is the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain. Of course, I will be emailing out and we will be posting on our social media about this upcoming event. Again, thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. And I want to thank Sarah and Jentine as well. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.